evening. This is Bill Flores. I'm the U.S. Congressman. We're calling constituents in Travis and Bastrop counties. We are going to work hard to keep this call to less than an hour in length. We also I'm going to make a few comments about some of the news in Washington today, and then we'll spend most of the time answering your questions. To ask a question, please press *3 to go into the queue. Again, you'll press *3 to go into the queue. Also, we're going to have a poll question tonight, and that is, what's the most important issue facing America today? We'll give you a chance to vote on that in a few minutes. Again, press *3 to get into the queue. I'll repeat myself again. For those of you just joining us, this is Bill Flores. I'm the U.S. Congressman for Texas District 17. We are having a third in a series of town halls tonight, calling into Travis and Bastrop counties. When I look at the issues that are facing Americans today, two of the ones that I get asked about most these days are the border crisis and veterans health care. And so what I'd like to do is to start off first thing by talking about those particular issues. In terms of veterans health care, as I think everybody's heard, there were some bad actors in different parts of the Veterans Administration that were cooking the books on waiting times. When Congress discovered that, we found several other issues related to health care in the VA, and also to how certain employees were behaving, how whistleblowers were being treated when they were reporting the bad things that were happening in the VA. And so we passed a bill in the House, and the Senate passed one as well, to try to deal with this issue, to make sure that our veterans got the health care that they deserve. We also wanted to do this in a way that was respectful of the hard work that taxpayers, of hard-working taxpaying families, that want to make sure that their money is well spent. That each of the House and the Senate passed bills to fix the VA healthcare issue. The two bills were different, and so in accordance with the Constitution, the House and the Senate each appointed conferees to a conference committee to sit down together and to work up a common solution that was bipartisan and bicameral that we could send to the President's desk. I was fortunate to be a member of that conference committee. I was the only Texan on the conference committee, and I was glad to be able to represent the 70,000 plus veterans that we have in District 17. Here are the highlights of that particular conference bill that passed the House today overwhelmingly. It passed with over 400 votes in favor. The first thing it does is it improves access to care by allowing veterans to seek private care outside the VA if VA doctors are unable to provide treatment within a certain number of days. Also, for veterans that live more than 40 miles away from a veterans facility, they can also obtain health care from a local provider should they decide to choose to. Now, if veterans want to go to the VA, they're still welcome to go to the VA, but we're giving them the option for health care outside the VA. Now, we also allocated $10 billion to a fund called the Veterans Choice Fund to cover the cost of this access for veterans that wanted to obtain care outside of the VA system. One of the issues we found is that we've got several bad actors in the VA. We've got several thousand employees in the VA that are committed to putting veterans first and to providing the best health care anywhere, which is the VA healthcare's mission. But we have some bad actors. And so what we've done is we've included in the conference bill were a couple of things to deal with this. One is we cut the bonuses for VA personnel, and number two is we gave the Secretary of the VA a greatly simplified structure for that person to be able to fire poor-performing employees without all the red tape and paperwork that they have to go through today. And so by doing that, we will hopefully improve the quality of the personnel at the VA substantially. Another thing that we need to do is we need to see if the VA is really accomplishing its mission or not. And so we have, part of the bill includes having an in-depth independent assessment conducted of the hospital care, the medical services, and the other health care that's furnished in VA medical facilities. We also need to make sure that we set the right measurements so that can be measured. So those are a couple of components that are built. It's also important that we extend counseling and treatment for veterans who suffered sexual trauma while serving on inactive duty in the military, for training when they were serving on inactive duty, in other words, reserve duty, training assignments. So we've covered that the counseling for sexual trauma, should that be the case. One other thing is we've expanded or changed the GI Bill for educational benefits a little bit to allow in-state tuition for all veterans that use the GI Bill for educational purposes. So I'm pleased that passed today by over 400 votes in the House. It'll go to the Senate tomorrow, and hopefully it'll be approved and it'll be on its way to the President's desk. For those of you that are just joining us, I want to thank you for joining this call. My name is Bill Flores. I'm the U.S. Congressman for Texas District 17. We are conducting a Tele-Town hall tonight in Bastrop and Travis counties. We try to do these from time to time when we have big news to report in Washington. If you'd like to ask a question, please press *3 to get in the queue to ask a question. Again, *3 to get in the queue. I think it's a good time since we're up to about 1,000 people on the call right now. I think it's a good time to ask a question, a poll question. I like to have these calls be interactive. So the question is, what is the most important issue facing America today? Again, what is the most important issue facing America today? You're going to vote with your touch-tone phone, and and I'm going to read off some answers, and then what you'll do is you'll press the number for the corresponding answer that you think is the biggest issue. I'm going to go through the list twice, so you'll have plenty of time to do that. If you think the biggest issue facing America today is jobs and economy, please press 1. If you think it's spending and deficits, press 2. Presidential overreach, press 3. Immigration and border security, press 4. Obamacare, press 5. Veterans issues, press 6. And other, press 7. So again,
your response has been registered.
Spending and deficits, press 2. Presidential overreach, press 3. Immigration and border security, press 4. Obamacare, press 5. Veterans issues, 6. And other, press 7. So just take a second to vote. And for those of you that have voted, please press *3 to get into the queue. I'd like to go ahead and continue with the next most important issue that or the other important issue that we are getting a lot of calls about. It may not be your most important issue, but it's an area where we are getting a lot of calls, and it has to do with the immigration and border and unaccompanied minor crisis that we have on our southern border. This is important to Texans. We have 2/3 of the border with Mexico in our state, and Texas seems to be the focal point for where these unaccompanied minors are coming across the border. Now, the first thing you have to ask is, what are the causes of this crisis? What happened? Well, there's really sort of three things. One is an action that the president took back in the middle of 2012. He issued a memo called DACA to defer action for certain immigrants that were in the country illegally. And after this action was taken by the president, this DACA action, a lot of entrepreneurs down in Latin America decided they would set up smuggling operations because they looked at DACA and said, that's a big flashing sign up on the U.S. border that says, come north, we'll take your kids, and they'll get to stay in the country and receive free benefits courtesy of the American taxpayer. And so we began to see the seeds sown for this ever-increasing number of unaccompanied minors coming across the border. That will probably, it's increased hundreds of percent year over year from 2012 to 2013, 2014. We're looking at estimates of about 90,000 unaccompanied minors coming across our border this year and up to 140,000 next year if we don't do anything. The second thing that happened is that when these children started coming across the border, the administration started looking at the way to deal with them, and they looked at the 2008 Trafficking Act that was passed by Congress and signed by President Bush. The Trafficking Act was meant to deal with the children that were being trafficked, typically in the sex trades, to give them a chance to be held in custody in the United States in a safe environment until we could figure out what to do with them. These children that are coming across today are not being trafficked for the most part. They're being smuggled. And the president has improperly applied the law to smuggled children instead of applying it only to trafficked children. So one of the things we need to do is fix the loopholes that the administration is using in that 2008 trafficking law. And then the third thing, which is just pretty well obvious when you have 50-plus thousand unaccompanied minors coming across your border now, is that our border is not secure. And so we need to address that. So the Speaker of the House, John Boehner, appointed a special task force to look at this issue and to try to determine how Congress should respond to this humanitarian crisis, this healthcare crisis, and this security crisis that has been created by the administration. And so the recommendations they came up with were numerous. And based on the recommendations, we have put together legislation in the House that does several things, and I'll go through those points to deal with this crisis. The first thing it does is it makes a change to the 2008 trafficking law to expedite the return of unaccompanied minors to their home countries by treating Central American children the same as those from Mexico or Canada. President Obama and the members of the administration have repeatedly started calling for such a change and saying that is a bipartisan priority. So the House agrees, and we've included that in our legislation that we're going to look at tomorrow. The second thing that was frustrating the Border Patrol is they would see illegal immigrants, but they'd see them come across onto land that was under the jurisdiction of the Interior Department or the Agriculture Department, and those two cabinet secretaries have banned the ability of the Border Patrol to go onto those public lands. Well, that's taxpayer-owned land, and there's no reason why we should not have border security on taxpayer-owned land. So one of the provisions of the bill is it prohibits those two cabinet secretaries from limiting the activities of the Customs and Border Patrol agents on federal public lands within 100 miles of the U.S.-Mexico border. The next thing we're doing is we're providing funding for the National Guard troops at the southern border. And as these troops are qualified to respond to humanitarian crisis like the one we have, and they'll relieve the Border Patrol to focus on their primary duty of securing our border. I think most of us realize that Governor Perry recently called out the National Guard and is sending them to the border. This essentially allows the federal government to pay for that instead of the state taxpayers of Texas being on the hook for those costs. So I think this is the right kind of activity to take. The president asked for $3.7 billion to deal with this issue. It didn't include very much money at all for border security, but it included a lot of money to house these children, these unaccompanied minors, for basically an indefinite period of time, and not to try to adjudicate their cases so that we can reunite these children with their families back home. We have reduced that request from $3.7 billion to less than $700 million, and we have made it heavily focused on border security and on providing additional judicial resources so that we can have hearings for these unaccompanied children and process them in a quick way and then repatriate them back to their home countries so that they can be reunified with their families. We also provide additional resources for immigrations and custom enforcement and Border Patrol operations that are to secure the border and increase detention space and expedite the processing and deportation and reunification of these children with their families. And as I said earlier, we increase the number of temporary immigration judges so that we can process these children in the quickest possible manner and then get them on their way back to their families. We also prioritize repatriation assistance to Guatemala Honduras, and El Salvador, and we take that money from existing foreign aid accounts so that we can reintegrate these children back to their home countries. And then, last but not least, one of the things that's caused concern among many Texans in particular is that these children were being housed on military bases, and they were disrupting our national security operations. And so this bill expresses the sense of the Congress, that unauthorized migrants should not be housed on military installations unless certain conditions are met. Yeah, so that's what's in the bill. There's one thing that's not in the bill that I wish was in the bill, and that was a provision to change DACA, to reverse what the president's DACA activities were starting back in the middle of 2012, and to defund that activity. We've already voted once in the House this year to defund the president's DACA activities, and I'm hopeful that I don't think we're going to get that put into this bill, but we are working with the leadership in the House and the Speaker to try to have at least a separate vote on DACA so that we can address that what I consider to be a shortfall in the bill. Overall, the bill is a good bill. It's not a perfect bill. It's hard to find perfect bills up here. But I think if we can vote on this bill and get it passed, and then get it sent over to the Senate, and then also have a vote to rescind DACA and defund DACA, that we will have materially improved or dealt with the crisis that was caused by the president's actions. Again, press *3 to get in the queue. For those of you that have just joined us, this is Congressman Bill Flores. I represent the 17th District of Texas, and we are having a town hall tonight for Travis and Bastrop counties. With that, we're going to go ahead and start answering questions. Again, press *3 to get into the queue, and from time to time, we're going to pause and take the poll question again, so that those persons that are on the call will have a chance to respond. So we're going to go to Ray and Austin. Ray, would you repeat your question, please?
Yes. My question is, you use the word bad actors, which I think is a good word, a good term. We use it a lot in legal when they write laws, but it usually refers to criminals. So the people that were in the Veterans Administration that you're referring to as bad actors, I think you said a few things about them not getting bonuses and them losing their jobs, but the things that they did were actually illegal. And I think we need to send a message that when you're in a position of authority like that, and you, in a conspiratorial way, commit crimes, that there's more than just losing your job and losing your bonuses. You've broken the law, and I think that you need to be prosecuted.
Ray, I have to agree with you, and that is one of the veterans bill that we passed today in the House doesn't preclude any potential criminal prosecution of people who have violated federal law. And I'll give you some great examples. In some of our hearings on this, we had whistleblowers that came to testify in front of Congress, and they talked about the retaliation that they were subject to inside the VA because of the fact that they were telling Congress what was going wrong, Congress and outsiders and the press and so forth, what was going wrong inside the VA. And these people were punished, and the activities were pretty egregious. And so it's our hope, and it's the intent of Congress, that the people who violated the federal whistleblowing laws or any other federal law, that they be prosecuted. We didn't think we had to put that into the veterans bill that we just passed because we already have statutes to deal with that, and so we elected to go that particular direction. But I appreciate your question, Ray. I'm going to move to George and Austin. George, would you repeat your question, please?
First, let me say I would love to have a button that I could agree with whatever the speaker is saying at the time, because I would have been punching the heck out of it from your last caller.
Okay, good. He's talking about Ray and the bad actors.
It might be good to have instant feedback like that.
Yeah, there you go. I wish we could get maybe likes and dislikes or something like that.
Yeah,
like
that would be
Facebook.
good.
That'd be fun.
I like it.
Anyway, what's your question, George?
My question is, well, I'm very unhappy with the president's overstepping his constitutional authority, and I don't know. Some people say sue him. I think that would take 2 years and it'd be timed perfectly for just before he gets out of office, and which serves us no good at all. Others say impeach him. Others say don't impeach him because it's political suicide. I think Krauthammer said recently. And I hate to see the Constitution ravaged the way it has been for political expedience. I'd like to know your impression. And I have one other question, if you can indulge me.
Why don't you go ahead and give me the second question, too? And
okay. This has perplexed me since 2008, and it seems to be a problem in the upcoming presidential election as well with some of the candidates that are being discussed. I'd like to know what you think the framers of the Constitution intended when they included natural-born citizen in presidential eligibility requirements.
Okay. All right. George, I appreciate your questions. Let me go through the overreach question first. I think when you look at the option, let me back up a little bit. When you look at the Constitution, I don't think the framers of the Constitution ever envisioned that we'd have a situation like we have today, where you have the leader of the executive branch, the president, openly ignoring the Constitution, writing his own law, ignoring current law, activities like that, covering up things. The framers never envisioned you'd have a president that would be that egregious like the current president. The second thing that they didn't envision was what would happen if you had Congress that would stand up for itself. And that's the box we're in today. That's the fact pattern we have, because you've got a president that openly flouts the law and ignores the Constitution. And then you've got a Senate that says, well, we don't care. We're not going to do anything about it. And so that makes it difficult for the House to do anything. And so I'm going to walk through impeachment first, and then we'll talk about what we're trying to do in terms of the options that are available to us. When you look at impeachment, you kind of have to start in Article 2 of the Constitution. You go to Section 4. And there it says, the President, Vice President, and all civil officers of the United States shall be removed from office on impeachment for and conviction of treason, bribery, or other high crimes and misdemeanors. So if you want to, when you look at the list of the things the President's done, I'll just run through those real quick here. You've got Fast and Furious and the gun running to Mexico. You've got the IRS targeting of conservative groups. You've got the destruction and loss of data and emails by the IRS and now the EPA. You've got unlawful breaches of the original Obamacare law. Then you've got things, just the incompetence in some parts of the administration because of the rollout failures of the Obamacare website, enrollment reporting, and things like that. Then you've got a bunch of national security and foreign policy failures: Iran, Iraq, Syria, Libya, Russia, Ukraine, relationship with Israel. But let's talk about Libya for a minute. So in Libya, the president decided he wanted to go in and bomb a country. And so now Libya's been destabilized because of the president's activities there by bombing and letting the then current president be removed from office. And so now what we have now is an unstable Libya, and we've actually had to close down and remove our personnel from our facilities there as of this week. Then a couple of years ago, you had a bunch of people storm one of our embassies, consulates rather, and kill 4 Americans. And then you had a cover-up for that. And that's all because of these failures of foreign policy and national security. Then you had the VA incompetence issues come up. And then I think in order to try to change the channel on that, the president decided he'd do the Taliban terrorists for a prisoner swap, and that hasn't worked out very well. He swapped 5 terrorists without informing Congress, according to the law. And it just goes on and on and on. You've got unconstitutional appointments to the NLRB and to the Consumer Finance Protection Board, and the Supreme Court has ruled 9-0 at each of those cases that those were unconstitutional activities. And then you've got targeting of media personnel in violation of the First Amendment to the Constitution. So if you were to ask persons and many folks in the House, has the president violated the law, and would he be worthy of impeachment? I think a fair number of people would say yes. And so then you say, okay, what do you do? And so then you turn back to the Constitution, you look at Article 1, Section 2, Clause 5, and there it says the House of Representatives shall have the sole power of impeachment. You say, okay, so what happens then? And so you go to Article 1, Section 3, Clause 6, and it says the Senate shall have the sole power to trial impeachments, and no person shall be convicted without the concurrence of 2/3 of the members present. So what that means is if we decided to use the impeachment option, then the House would have to vote to impeach, and then the Senate would have to try and convict with a 2/3 majority. I think all of us would agree there's no way you get 2/3 of the Senate. And so what would happen if you did that and then you failed? Well, first of all, you haven't accomplished anything because you're not going to change the president's behavior. He hasn't been convicted. And in all likelihood, the media would side with the president, and you would help him turn his situation around, just like the situation that happened with Bill Clinton back in the 90s. And so I think it would hurt the Congress to engage in that type of activity unless you have a high likelihood that you're going to be successful. In this case, I think it's pretty obvious we can't be. The next option you talked about was do nothing. Well, that's frustrating to Americans to see the president do all this stuff and get away with it. It's frustrating to me in Congress to watch the president do all these things and get away with it. So doing nothing, in my view, is not an approach that works. So I don't think doing nothing is an option. Impeachment is not an option. And then, what's left? And the only other thing really is to sue the president based on specific breaches of the law. And so that's what we approved in the House of Representatives today, was approving that the House of Representatives as a body, not as a group of members, is suing the president on behalf of the citizens of the United States of America to hold the president accountable to the Constitution, accountable to the law, and to restore the rights and liberties and freedoms of Americans that we enjoy under our Constitution. The downside is to that is it takes a long time, and that's kind of where we are. It's just going to take a long time to put it through the court. But that's when you walk through the options like we did, that's what we're faced with. So now to get to your second question, what do I think the framers of the Constitution envisioned when they said that a person running for president had to be a natural-born citizen? I think they intended that would be a natural-born citizen to at least one U.S. citizen parent on U.S. soil. That's my view of the world. I think that's what they meant. And so with that, I'm going to ask anybody that wants to get in the queue to press *3 to get in the queue. Again, *3. We're going to take a question from Gary and Austin, and then we'll have a poll after this. Gary, would you repeat your question?
Yeah, my question was, how come the United States is paying interest to a private bank on every dollar that the Treasury Department prints?
Okay. Gary, thank you for the question. Well, the federal government, when it borrows money, has to pay the interest cost on that money. And I think in this case, you're probably talking about paying interest to the Federal Reserve, because the Federal Reserve is monetizing part of our debt. It's basically printing money for some of the portion of the monthly deficits that the government is running. The Federal Reserve is not actually a private institution. It is a separate public institution, and the profit from the operations of the income that the Federal Reserve receives are used to cover the cost of the Federal Reserve, and then the excess profit, if any, is returned to the Treasury of the United States. So there's no group of individuals, no corporation or anybody that's benefiting from the interest cost, that's interest income that's being paid to the Treasury by the United States government. Now, the other folks that hold Treasury notes and Treasury instruments are like retirement plans for teachers and so forth. They are receiving the interest that's being paid on the treasuries of the borrowings of the United States, and that's a different deal. But they have loaned real money to the federal government for its operations, so they should be paid. We'll get back to our questions in just a minute. Press *3 to get into the queue. I'd like to go back to our poll question for a minute, if we can. This is the second time we've asked a poll question tonight, so if you haven't voted in our poll yet tonight, I'm going to give you 7 options for what you think is the most important issue facing America today. And you'll vote using your touch-tone phone with the corresponding number. So I'll give you the options and the numbers, and then you'll vote. I'll go through them twice, so you'll have plenty of time to think about what's most important to you and to vote. The first one, again, the question is, what do you consider to be the most important issue facing America today? Option number 1 is jobs in the economy. Option number 2 is spending and deficits. Option number 3 is presidential overreach. Option number 4 is immigration and border security. Option number 5 is Obamacare. Option number 6 are veterans issues. Option number 7 is others. So again, jobs in the economy, number 1. Spending and deficits, number 2. Presidential overreach, number 3. Immigration and border security, number 4. Obamacare, number 5. Veterans issues, number 6. Another number 7. So take just a second and vote.
Your response has been registered.
Okay, with that, we're going to go to, and I hope I get this name right. Is it Ale? Ale, would you repeat your question, please? Ale, can you repeat your question?
Who is this?
Oh, Ale, yes. This will
Al.
Al, okay, I'm sorry. I guess.
Oh, not a problem. You know, I was listening to all your selections, and the problem is that at the very end, you did not say or all of the above, because I think the majority of the people really have concern about just about everything that's going on right now. And I think we need to, really concentrate on the whole. Because, everybody's concentrating on a little bit here, a little bit there. And I think we need to really focus on the whole, because everybody is concerned about immigration, about the president's overreach, about everything that you've brought up. I mean, literally. And it's tough to zero in on one specific item.
Al, I have to agree with you, and we'll be sure to add an all of the above to the next time we do this. Actually, that we had a Tele-Town hall on Monday, and we had a questioner recommend that, and I guess we just forgot to put it on here tonight. So I'm sorry, but we'll do it. So I guess you could vote for other, and then we'll just know that one of those votes and other is for all, or some of the votes and other are for all. There are other issues out there today too that we haven't addressed. I mean, we haven't talked about national security issues with what's happened to our military. We haven't talked about what's happening in the Middle East. We haven't talked about what's happening in Iraq. We haven't talked about the concerns that might be happening in Afghanistan. So there's a whole list of things, but I was trying to keep the list to something sort of manageable tonight. But you raise a great point. We'll be sure to try to address that in the future. Again, press *3 to get in the queue. And our goal, as I said at the beginning of the call, is to try to keep this to less than an hour so that we're respectful of your time. We're going to go to Pamela. Pamela, can you repeat your question, please?
Yes. My question is about this. Has it come to your attention that there is actually a lot of corruption in child protective services systems? I'm basically a Christian minister, and we help a lot of needy people. especially families. And we've yet to come across a family who has not had trouble with Child Protective Services basically bothering them, and they felt that it was unjust. And we've actually witnessed with our own eyes some of these things. And so, I mean, even to the point of, the most egregious things are things like social workers being pimps of foster children and things like that. But, the more minor things are, we've even had social workers admit to us that they treat people who don't have money differently from people who can afford lawyers. So, my question is, has that come to your attention? And, what can be done about this? I mean, and from my perspective, what I would like to see happen is for 3 acts to be repealed. It's the Mondale Act of 1974, the Adoption Assistance and Child Welfare Act of 1980, and part of Title 4E of Social Security that gives federal money to state governments for taking children away, and they also are given more money for taking away children who are not white. So just as somebody who's kind of seeing it from the perspective of people who are very, very disadvantaged, it hurts my heart to see that the system that we are paying for with our money that is supposed to be helping people is actually hurting them. So that's my question. What can we do?
Pamela, can you give? I wrote down the Mondale Act of 74. Can you give me the other two again? I
will. Let me just go back to the computer because I have these typed up. There's 2 other ones. It's the Adoption Assistance and Child Welfare Act of 1980, and then there's part of the Social Security Title 4E funding. That's where it says that if Child Protective Services of a state are able to take away a child, they get more federal reimbursement if they are minority children. And so that does cause bias, I think.
Okay. Pamela, thanks for your question. I'll be candid with you. I don't always have answers to every question, and you've stumped me tonight. I'll tell you what we'd like to do. We have your number, and so if you don't mind, we're going to go ahead and call you tomorrow and try to get more detail on this. For the most part, Child Protective Services is a state function, and so I always want to be respectful of the Constitution, where it says, that the federal government has a limited amount of enumerated powers, if you will, and that everything else belongs to citizens or to the states. And so I want to make sure we take a light touch when it comes to the federal government getting involved in CPS activities. That said, I will take a look at the interface between the federal government and state government on CPS issues. You did raise a couple of other issues that I think are very important, and I think you should know that we are aware of these in Congress, and we're working on them. You talked about the risk that foster children have in terms of being put into the CPS system, and that they have risk of being trafficked. And we have seen that quite a lot. And so over the past 2 months in Congress, we have really paid a lot of attention to the whole trafficking industry, the trafficking trade, and some of the weaknesses in current federal law that deal with trafficking, both here at home and as well as internationally. And so we passed about 8 new bills by large bipartisan votes to deal with the trafficking issue, and one of those is to deal with the vulnerability that foster children have to being pimped, if you will, in the sex trade. So you raised a good question. If you don't mind, we're going to have somebody call you trying to dig into the weeds of the CPS issue, if that's okay. For everybody, I'd ask you to press *3 to get into the queue. And so we're going to talk to Michael in Austin. Again, *3 to get in the queue. Michael, would you repeat your question, please? Michael from Austin.
Oh, sorry about that. I had the good fortune to meet you in Travis County, Precinct 207, on Election Day a couple of years back.
Yes.
Found out you're my new congressman.
You're right.
And
redistricting made everything pretty confusing for a while, didn't it?
Right. Well, I first spoke to you because we never heard from Michael McCall, and this is the second conference I've been on. I really appreciate you communicating with constituents far better than your predecessor. Anyway, the reason I was calling is looking at Eric Cantor's page on the House schedule from now to Election Day. I've only got 13 work days left, including a shorter day tomorrow. And I was wondering, considering all the things that are important and dire, if you would be pressing Speaker Boehner to add some more work days to the calendar.
Right. Michael, we appreciate your question, and you raise a pretty valid issue that is of concern to many of us in Congress. Let me start out by telling you a little bit about the job first. And by the way, everybody else that wants to get in the queue to ask a question, please press *3. My job title is the same, or my job description is the same as my title is representative. And so, as a representative, in order to be an effective representative, you need to spend a fair amount of time in the district. And so the typical legislative schedule is there are 2 weeks in Washington, D.C., and then a week back in the district, then 2, and then 1, and so forth. So on any given month, except for a couple of exceptions, I'm in Washington, D.C. for 3 weeks, and then I'm back in the district for a week. And then I come home every weekend to the district, and I'm typically running around all around the district as we go around. Now, unfortunately, and you raise a great point, unfortunately in election years, the calendar gets really open, the work calendar, if you will, in Washington gets really open around election time. So we've got 1 day before the August, this week before the August work period starts on August the 1st, and we are back in our districts from August the 1st to about September the 8th, I think. And then we'll be in session for 3 weeks in September, and then back in the districts until after the election in November. And I think that's so everybody can be making the mad scramble back through their districts to try to run for re-election. I don't like that schedule very much, but I don't set the rules. I will tell you this. If we don't get this border security bill dealt with tomorrow, it's been my publicly stated position several times in front of the media that we should stay in session until we get that issue dealt with. And I've expressed that to my colleagues. I've expressed it to our leadership, and I've expressed it to anybody that listens to the media. Now, I don't know what will happen, though. I mean, I'm one vote out of 435. I would vote to stay in session longer so that we can deal with these issues. We've also got other issues related to, Israel has requested some extra funding for their Iron Dome missile system. I think we need to look at that. The Federal Highway Trust Fund is running out of money. We need, with the House dealt with that, and now the Senate kicked that back to us. We need to deal with that pretty soon. So if it were up to me, I would stay in session as long as it took to get the job done. Now, when you look at the schedule, you also see a lot of open time in November, December. I can guarantee you that's going to fill up when we move into the lame duck session after the elections, because there's a lot that hasn't been done during the ordinary part of the year that's going to wind up packed into that lame duck session. I don't like that either, but the good news is it'll get done. The bad news is it gets done in the lame duck session. So you and I are kind of on the same page in terms of expanding the time period that we're going to be spending doing these things. Press *3 to get into the queue. We're going to run through the poll question again really quickly if we can. If you haven't voted yet, by the way, thanks for joining us on this call. This is Congressman Bill Flores, and we're having our third Tele-Town hall over the last few days to talk about the things that are happening in Washington. What's the most important issue facing America today? Press 1 for jobs and the economy, 2 for spending and deficits, 3 for presidential overreach, 4 for immigration and border security, press 5 for Obamacare, 6 for veterans issues, and 7 for other. I guess you can try pressing 8 for all of the above, and let's see what happens on the screen here. Jobs and economy.
Your response has been registered.
Overreach 3, immigration, border security number 4, Obamacare number 5, veterans issues number 6, and the other number 7. Try pressing 8 for all the above. Let's go to Dawn in Pflugerville. Dawn, would you repeat your question, please? Dawn, can you hear me? Dawn,
I'm here. Are you there?
Yes, ma'am. Now I hear you. I'm sorry.
Oh, perfect. Hi. One of the things that you were discussing earlier about veterans and their need for adequate medical care and about the Veterans Administration, one of the things I was wondering is there's been medical studies that have been done recently on cannabis use for veterans for PTSD. And I was just wondering what your position was for supporting cannabis use for PTSD for veterans, and also would you support a bill in the state of Texas for allowing cannabis to be legalized here in the state?
Okay. Don, I appreciate your question. As far as cannabis use for PTSD, I don't know the facts on that. I hate to say that, but I just don't know the facts, so I'd have to study the issue. I will say the whole marijuana issue being legal in some states and illegal in other states, and then with an overarching illegal scheme at the federal government, my view is I believe strongly in states' rights. I think states have the right to determine that, but we still have this federal law on the books, and so if we have a federal law, I think the federal law ought to be enforced. It's not to say that we should maybe change the federal law, but I would rather let the state of Texas do what the folks in the state of Texas want to do. Now, if you ask me to vote on just general cannabis use, I would vote no. I don't think that's a good idea. I don't think it's a good idea to do, for instance, what Colorado's done. And Colorado is already starting to see some of the repercussions of what they've done in terms of making marijuana legal. Now, for medical uses, I'd be willing to look at the data for PTSD and veterans. PTSD is a severe issue that needs to be addressed for our veterans, and I'd take a look at that. So I can't give you a definitive answer on that today. By the way, if we don't get to your call tonight, I'd ask that you stay on the call until the very end, and then be sure and leave us your name and your information, and leave us a voicemail, and then we'll get back to you soon on that. I have promised that a couple of things. One is that we would keep this call to less than an hour. We also promised that we would give you the results of the poll questions. Before we do that, I'd like to ask you to continue following us. You can go to our website. It's flores.house.gov. Again, flores.house.gov. And keep up with us and sign up for our periodic emails so you can see what's happening. You can follow us on Facebook at facebook.com/rep, R-E-P, Bill Flores, BILLFLORES. So Rep Bill Flores. You can also follow us on Twitter at Rep Bill Flores. So be sure and follow us. The results of the poll are as follows. The item that got the most votes was jobs in the economy at number 1. They got 23% of the votes. Number 2 was presidential overreach with 21% of the votes. Number 3 was spending and deficits with 20% of the votes. Number 4 was immigration and border security with 17% of the votes. Other got 9% of the votes. All of the above got 7% of the votes. I'm not sure that's statistically accurate because we didn't have it earlier. I wish we had added earlier. And then veterans issues, and this one surprises me. Veterans issues got no votes at all. Anyway, this concludes our call for tonight. Again, stay on the call if you didn't get your question answered, and be sure and leave us a voicemail. Be sure and pray for our military men and women who protect our country from threats overseas. Pray for our first responders who keep us safe here at home, and pray for our country in general. Good night, and God bless you.